On a cold October evening in 2009, the small town of St. Martin's, Missouri, was shaken by a crime so horrifying that it would forever scar the community. The victim was a bubbly, sweet 9-year-old girl named Elizabeth Olten, whose life was brutally cut short in a case that left everyone asking, why? Elizabeth Olten was an average 4th grader who loved playing with friends and adored her family. She was known for her infectious smile and her love of animals, especially her pet kitten. Her mother, Patty Price, described Elizabeth as a happy and loving child who brought joy to everyone around her. On October 21, 2009, she went to a neighbor's house to play with a friend. Her mother, Patty, expected her to return home by 6:15 p.m. When Elizabeth didn't come back, her mother grew worried and went looking for her. But Elizabeth was nowhere to be found. Patty immediately called the police, setting off a frantic search involving neighbors, local volunteers, and law enforcement. The community, usually so peaceful, was now on high alert, their hearts heavy with worry and fear. As night fell, the search became more desperate. Flashlights scanned the woods, and the sound of calling voices echoed through the trees. Despite everyone's best efforts, there was no sign of Elizabeth. The breakthrough came when the police received a tip from a local teenager, Alyssa Bustamante. Alyssa, just 15 years old, had a troubled history. She was known for her dark personality and fascination with death. Her classmates often described her as a loner, someone who kept to herself and wore a mask of indifference. Alyssa often wrote disturbing thoughts in her journal and posted alarming messages on social media, expressing her inner turmoil and struggles. Alyssa lived with her grandparents, who had taken her in because her mother was dealing with substance abuse issues. Despite their efforts to provide a stable home, Alyssa's behavior grew increasingly erratic. She had attempted suicide multiple times and was on medication for depression. She hid her dark thoughts behind a facade of normalcy, but those who knew her well sensed something was deeply wrong. When questioned, Alyssa admitted that she had seen Elizabeth that evening and even led police to a wooded area near her home. The police were initially skeptical, but as Alyssa began to describe what had happened, their skepticism turned to horror. Alyssa had lured Elizabeth into the woods under the guise of playing a game. Once they were deep in the forest, Alyssa attacked Elizabeth, strangling her, slitting her throat, and then stabbing her multiple times. She then buried Elizabeth's body in a shallow grave she had dug days before. The discovery of Elizabeth's lifeless body confirmed the community's worst fears. The sweet, innocent girl they had been searching for was gone. The news of Elizabeth's murder sent shockwaves through St. Martin's. People who had once felt safe in their small town now locked their doors and kept their children close. The question on everyone's mind was, who could do something so terrible? The answer was even more shocking. Alyssa Bustamante, the same girl who had helped search for Elizabeth, was the one responsible for her death. Alyssa's motive was chilling in its simplicity. She wanted to know what it felt like to kill someone. She had written about her dark desires in her journal, detailing her plan to murder an innocent child. The journal entries, filled with graphic descriptions and an alarming lack of remorse, painted a picture of a deeply disturbed individual. In her journal, Alyssa had written, "I just fucking killed someone. I strangled them and slit their throat and stabbed them, now they're dead. It was amazing. As soon as you get over the 'oh my god, I can't do this' feeling, it's pretty enjoyable." These words, read aloud in court, sent chills down the spines of everyone present. The community struggled to reconcile the image of the quiet, troubled teenager they knew with the cold-blooded killer described in those pages. The trial of Alyssa Bustamante was a harrowing experience for everyone involved. The prosecution painted a picture of a deeply disturbed young girl who had planned and executed a cold-blooded murder. They presented evidence of Alyssa's premeditation, pointing to the fact that she had dug the grave days in advance and lured Elizabeth into the woods with the intent to kill her. Alyssa's defense argued that she was mentally ill, suffering from severe depression and a troubled upbringing. They highlighted her history of self-harm, suicide attempts, and the chaotic environment she grew up in. The court heard chilling evidence, including entries from Alyssa's journal where she described the murder in gruesome detail. The prosecution also presented testimony from psychologists who explained Alyssa's fascination with death and her desire to experience killing someone. They described her as a sociopath who lacked empathy and showed no remorse for her actions. The defense, on the other hand, argued that Alyssa was a deeply troubled teenager who needed help, not a monster who deserved to be locked away forever. Throughout the trial, Alyssa showed little emotion. She sat quietly, often staring at her hands or the floor, as the horrifying details of her crime were recounted. The impact of her actions was evident in the faces of Elizabeth's family and the community. Elizabeth's mother, Patty, attended every day of the trial, her grief and anger palpable. She spoke about the devastating loss of her daughter, describing the hole it had left in her heart and the lives of everyone who loved Elizabeth. In the end, Alyssa Bustamante was found guilty of second-degree murder and armed criminal action. She was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole, plus an additional 30 years. The sentence brought some relief to Elizabeth's grieving family, but the pain of their loss would never fully heal. Elizabeth's family continued to honor her memory, cherishing the brief time they had with her and mourning the future she was robbed of.
The murder of Elizabeth Olten remains a haunting reminder of the darkness that can lurk behind seemingly ordinary faces. Alyssa Bustamante's crime was not just an act of violence, but a betrayal of the innocence and trust that defined childhood. The case also sparked discussions about mental health, juvenile justice, and the warning signs of violent behavior. People questioned how such a tragedy could have been prevented and what more could be done to identify and help troubled youth before they committed such heinous acts.